Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Tia Kansara and I'll be hosting this live brought to you by Replenish Earth. Replenish Earth's mission is to transition businesses and governments to sustainable supply chains and exploring all sorts of different ways of replenishing the environment. And today with me, I have a very special guest, and this guest is Dr. Jonathan Reichental. I'm going to invite you
Hi
on
there.
as well. Hi, Jonathan. Very excited to have you on our live session. Super, super fun. Dr. Jonathan Reichental is a multiple award-winning technology and business leader whose career has spanned both the private and the public sectors. His senior software engineer manager, as well as a director of technology innovation. I've known him as the Chief Innovation and Information Officer at both O'Reilly Media and the city of Palo Alto, California, aka the home of Silicon Valley. He creates incredible content online on LinkedIn Education, which I've had the pleasure of watching, and also recently published a very, very exciting book called Smart Cities for Dummies, which I had the pleasure of learning about when we were both in California last year, right?
Early this year, actually.
Oh my gosh,
Seems like last year.
time just flies. Time just flies. Where does it all go? How are you doing, Jonathan?
Well, I'm great. It's lovely to see you. I'm here in lovely Northern California, as you said, just south of San Francisco. It's a beautiful morning, and let's talk about the future of cities. Can't wait.
Definitely. So one of my big questions, and I think a lot of people ask this question, is what are smart cities? So Jonathan, take it away. What is a smart city?
Yeah, it is probably certainly one of the most important questions of all. And it's a great way to start a conversation on this topic by at least getting out there my idea of the definition. And I'd love to hear yours too when I give you mine. So in order to give a good explanation of this space, this movement, you have to give a little bit of background about what's going on. You know, for most of human history, humans have been around about 200,000 years. We've sort of lived in small groups in pretty much a rural context, and you know we had our little gatherings. We would go and forage for food each day, and over time things developed. But we pretty much were scattered and wanderers, and that was the case for thousands of years. But certainly something major began to change just in the last few thousand years, and then very significantly just in the last 700 years or so. And it starts with the Renaissance in beautiful Florence in Italy. That's really where humans start to really think about their future and figure out, how do we want to live, and how do we store knowledge and create better commerce and all the good stuff that happened, including the art that emerged out of the Renaissance. And that led to like the scientific revolution and then the industrial revolutions. And it's the industrial revolutions that really began to urbanize the planet in a very big way, starting in the mid 1700s. And since about 1750, we have, as humans, continued this migration into a urban context. And it's just grown from a few million people around the world to a billion people, and now up to about almost 3.5 to 4 billion humans living in a dense urban environment. And it's all happened really quickly, and it's growing fast. So I love this statistic. I love numbers and statistics, but 3 million people move into cities every single week now. 3 million people move into cities, and we're building cities at a rate of, imagine the entire urbanization of New York City, of Manhattan. We're building that every single month somewhere in the world. and we're going to do that for the next 40 years. We're going to build a New York City every month for the next 40 years. And I always say that's a lot of refrigerators and microwave ovens. And so our cities are really our destiny. Cities are where humans are going to live out, well, as far as we can see, our civilization. And
scary to hear all of the statistics on what is a smart city. I feel like one of the biggest questions that we've been trying to figure out is, what does smart actually mean? So when we've got an actual city, there's sort of like these incredible congregation spaces, and we can see that in any of the ancient cities like Aleppo or Damascus or Jericho, like all of these ancient cities that have really survived for well over 1,000 years. So many of these, if you take, for example, Aleppo, and I have the fortune just in 2009 and also in 2010 to have visited Syria twice. And during that time, really had an opportunity to dig deep into Aleppo with Adli Qudsi, one of my absolute favorite architects. But the reason that Aleppo had become a kind of a heritage city, a world heritage city, a site, in 1983 or 4. So it's a really fascinating opportunity to explore, what does a city mean when a city changes over time. So smart is sort of kind of like a new addition. So what is it about the smart that really makes it the smart, as in, and in what way smart?
Yeah. Well, I love that you brought up those examples and the fact that you, like myself, have traveled extensively around the world. And I mean, one of the things I think you probably experience similarly to myself and anyone who is a global warrior is that, you get to the airport, and in any major city in the world, you get in a cab or something or an Uber, and you're going to go to a hotel. And what are you faced with? Congestion, traffic, lots and lots of cars. I mean, some cities like São Paulo in Brazil, the airport's relatively close to the city center, but it takes a couple of hours because the traffic is so bad. So because cities have become so popular and so dense, and they're actually very successful for the most part, they are not necessarily in a state that is providing for a good quality of life for everybody. So smart is about improving the quality of life. Right. And we can use any term. We kind of get caught up in this smart term, right? And some people don't like it. I say in this book, for example, don't worry about the term. Worry about how do we bring to bear technology, best practices, new thinking. How do we bring that to bear in a city so that we can improve the quality of life, improve health, and be more inclusive? I think you have a passion for both the inclusiveness and the sustainability, because as we'll probably talk about in a moment, it's in our cities where we're going to really help with preserving the environment and helping manage what looks like a management problem now, the climate crisis. I thought I'd end just by sharing with you the actual definition I included in the book, because I think you wanted me to read that, right?
Yeah, go for it.
I printed it out before we started the show today. So here's what I write. I give a whole explanation how I derived it, but you have to give at least one definition. And I say here, a smart city is an approach to urbanization, so far so good, that uses innovative technologies, because technology is very important in this topic, to enhance community services. That sounds good. And economic opportunities, because we want to prosper, right? Improve city infrastructure, and that's not necessarily the case around the world. Our infrastructure is certainly decaying in many places. Reduce cost, and you'll like this, resource consumption.
There we go.
Yeah, we have to reduce resource consumption. And finally, increase civic engagement. Bring everyone into the conversation. Communities are about community, of course. And so that's my definition. Lots of people will have variations of it, but I think that is the spirit of it. What do you think?
Totally. I think I really like the different sort of areas that where you're kind of delving into in the book. I've really had the pleasure of knowing you for what feels like almost 5-6 years now. And we were on I think it was the machine learning summit at Web Summit, I believe, and I was hosting a fireside chat with you. And whilst I was hosting, wanted to delve into much of the work that you've actually been doing in Palo Alto. And I think that there are bigger questions when it comes to smart cities. And of course, it's about the intelligence of the city being able to work for itself and to gather the information for us as the managers, or the kind of like the little Oompa Loompas behind the scenes, getting things together and sharing that data, so that there is this sort of the larger conversation of what it means to have a smart city. So I think, for me, it would be really nice to hear from you. What is it that inspired you to write this? Because you're in what is the most exciting, probably like the most exciting area. You're learning about the largest cities around the world. You're in touch with many of the C-level city managers across the world, and you most probably don't need to work with the general public directly, because you're putting these incredible policies in place and you're working with other city managers. So what inspired you to write the guide for Dummies? Like really kind of like bring it down to basics, because I'm sure that there are so many different areas that you can go into, and I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are there.
Sure. One of the biggest surprises of my life was actually working for government. I'm a private sector guy. I spent many years in several different types of very large organizations and a couple of small ones too. And I got this invitation to be the chief information officer for a great city here in California. And it was a surprise. I wasn't sure that I could be successful in a government bureaucracy. It's nice in the private sector. Often you can sort of be a maverick and take some bold risks, and moving into the public sector meant being very constrained by rules and following policy. But I fell in love with cities. I really did. I didn't recognize what they were just being a community member. I had to get into I had to peep behind the curtain, as I like to say, and really figure out how does a city work, and every day how does a mega city, like a city over 10 million people, just power up every morning and provide services for 15, 20, 25 million people. It's a remarkable human achievement. And so, over approximately 10 years, I worked with my team at the city of Palo Alto, and I started to share a lot of our successes, also sharing what didn't go so well. And I was very honored to be invited to speak with mayors and city managers and governors all over the world, and all over Europe and Australia and Asia. And the more I did it, the more I just loved it, and the more I felt, I can make a difference. And I mean, that's it's worth noting, working in public service, working in the public sector, you're not going to get rich. It's not a get rich scheme, but the reward, the psychic income you can earn by giving back to society and giving of your time for for helping others, that's priceless. And so I learned all these things, went to all these conferences, spoke to lots of people, made many, many keynotes. And as I kind of traveled around, I could see the different domains of cities. So let me explain. A city is made up of many different components, right? Transportation, buildings, environment, healthcare, education, connectivity, water systems, power, and so when I would go around, I would see experts who would talk about one area or another. I'd talk to city managers who understood a little bit, and some understood other parts, and more or less. And I was reading the literature, and I realized, I was getting this privilege to have a lot of visibility to what was going on, and others were getting little, looking at smaller parts of it. And finally, I felt it would be great to bring it all together into one comprehensive guide, one comprehensive book. And I was just completely floored to get an invitation by Wiley, one of the world's leading publishers, to write a book on smart cities. They approached me and said, could you do this? And I was like, that's a fabulous idea. It's what I want to do. And I think I have a lot to contribute. And then finally they said, how about we do it in the Dummies series? And it comes with a whole brand around it. So I was, to kind of summarize, I was motivated to create an easy to understand, comprehensive guide for everybody. And I say,
God.
it's if
I mean, it's pretty scary thinking about like everyone, right? Like all the different, I mean, I just know that my mom would be asking the most basic, simple question, which would floor me, because it would be like, you take your PhD brain and put it into a sentence. And it's like, okay, so mom, right, where do I start? So, because there's so much about cities. And
yes,
as you were talking about the sort of like the urban aspects or the governance aspects, buildings, Kingsley in the chat mentioned buildings. I mean, the smart, building management systems, etc., of almost digitizing these cities, because we're digitizing our lives, we're becoming digital. And so by having these sort of layers, we're almost identifying so many other areas of expertise, because as a decade ago, perhaps people weren't so aware of what we could do with the technology that we can today.
Right.
Bring in quantum computing and bring in artificial intelligence, bring in machine learning into cities. And those decisions where, when the first map of London's Oyster, you might remember Oyster card,
Yes.
movements around the city of London. I remember the team that worked on that at CASA, the Centre of Advanced Spatial Analysis at UCL, Professor Michael Batty. And it was just this incredible data visualization. You could see where people were, and it was great for the likes of the Mayor of London, who could decide where they were going to put some of their resources.
Yes.
For the actual citizen, what do you feel, is one of the questions that they were asking, and how did it guide you when you were writing it? So what were your learnings about the learnings of the audience that you were writing it for?
Yeah, fortunately, I had several years of experience of what were common themes. People, when you travel around the world, you start to see people ask similar questions. City managers and city administrators are interested in the same thing. It goes without saying that cost is probably up there in priorities. Like how is tax money spent for the good of the community? Can we get visibility to that? And then how are decisions made, on our behalf? For most people, I think this really resonates with you. For most people, what happens, how a city functions is kind of a black box. People don't know the magic that goes on at City Hall and in the various municipal buildings. The wizardry, right? And what I found in my life, as a curious person, is things are not as super complicated as we think they are once you start to observe and start to learn a little bit. I was always fascinated. How do the traffic signals work? It's such a simple question. How do traffic signals work? And I got to see that. And I was like, oh, it's actually simpler than I thought. And in some ways more fragile than I thought. So people ask about how's money spent. They want more transparency. They want to know how decisions are made. And they're fed up, frankly, about inefficiencies. That you have to go to a building and maybe spend a few hours of your day to, pay a parking ticket or to start the process of getting a permit. And so, people are intrigued. How come the private sector is already quite efficient and the public sector just feels like it's, decades behind? And so they want answers around that. And not only do they want answers why that's the case and how it all works, But then the most important question of all, and I think we're going to get to that today, is what do we do about it? How do we improve things? How do we spend our money more wisely and efficiently? How do we make things run better? How do we clean up the environment? How do we digitize more of these, these messy, ugly, bureaucratic processes? So people ask, the common things. I got to say, my final point on this is, if I ever need to explain, the challenges of cities, or, kind of give that one sentence or one idea that everyone can connect with, it's being in a car in a traffic jam or looking for a parking space, right? And everyone says, yeah, that's hell. That's hell, and that's a universal problem. Now, the answer is not necessarily to build more parking spaces. It's to explore all forms of transportation and rethink things for the 21st century. But those are the themes. Those are the things I was hearing and continue to hear from people. I mean, what do you hear when you talk to different city leaders?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's definitely this link between decision makers and the public, who are, there's sort of like a bridge between them, and sometimes that bridge doesn't exist, and at other times the bridge is brilliant and it. One of the things that I was really inspired actually by your work was the app Palo Alto, was it 3112? The app where, back in the day, where, what do you mean an app for the city? But you could actually take a photograph of something that wasn't working locally, upload it onto your app, and then follow the entire journey of it being fixed. Yes. And then feedback loop, message back to you to tell you, hey, look, we fixed this. I think that kind of transparency in the system would have, given a lot of the general public an opportunity to see, so what is it that you're doing in that black box of yours? Like, right. How are you making these decisions? What kind of data are you collecting? Not only of us, but all of our, all the different systems that are in interplay, right? The city doesn't just work on its own. It works with so many other infrastructural bridges that are required for them to work together. So that level of architecture, not just physical, but digital architecture, software architecture that's required is so much more advanced when you're looking at cities like Tokyo, for example. So I remember first ever going to Tokyo and thinking, wow, this city runs so differently from London. And then, as a kid, really, my eyes were like brightly open, just thinking, what is London missing when I see this? And the experience of this city, because it's so immersive. You go into a city and it's an immersive multi-sensory experience, whether it's the lights, it's the smell of the city. I remember the secret cinemas in the UK. There was this secret cinema for, I think it was Harrison Ford movie, and I remember this moment sort of walking in and thinking, wow, this is almost like it was in the actual cinema, in the actual movie. They've recreated the whole of this experience, but why did I get that sense that this was the same? And so there's this cultural element of what is it that we share in cities? And there's this globalized, almost like this McDonald's approach to the city and its design, because as soon as you start to delve into certain cities, you'll see, you kind of like start noticing which cities have been talking to each other and have been sort of sharing notes and thinking, so what are you guys doing about waste management? What are you guys doing about, and like a little bit of a gossip session behind the scenes. And they're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. So we should try and implement that. But our culture is slightly different, and people prefer to do this rather than that. So it's really a nuance piece. But I think layered with the culture and the dynamic of the people and the history of the challenges of the city itself, and then you pair that up with the dynamism that comes out of innovating cities, because ultimately, as we're moving forward, one of our biggest issues is holding the amount of data that we do for cities. Right. So that brings me to my next question, Jonathan. What is the value of data in cities? I can only imagine there is thousands of petabytes of data that's being collected at any one second. Yeah. Trying to make sense of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Hey, and I just I loved some of your ideas there, and I wanted to share one more thing that kind of brings it all together in many ways. Is many people ask me, what's the formula for a
Ooh,
smart city? You know,
secret formula.
what's the secret formula? Have you written a book on the secret formula? Well, I wish I could say yes, but what I did discover, and I think you discovered the same thing, because of culture and history and everything else that makes up a urban environment, it's different for every city. And what I mean by that is the needs of that city are different. The way that the heartbeat of that city, beats, is different for every city. So that there can't be a magic formula when every recipe is completely different. So one of my findings in the deep research I did over many years was that smart city is a reflection of a particular city's needs and the direction they're headed in. While there's some commonalities like buildings and transportation and the environment, there's a lot of detail at the individual city level that's unique to them. Now, I want to talk about data, and it's funny because it was the first chapter I wrote. I think it's chapter 6 or something, and it's the first one I wrote because it is the area that I found to be very dynamic, very rich, and it's one where I think people can understand. It's very easy to quickly connect. So let me give a quick backstory, if I could. I came from the private sector, as you well know, and it was there for something like 15 years or so as a technology leader in various organizations and roles. And data and the notion of big data, right, having huge volumes of data, was already recognized and was being incorporated into how private companies were functioning. And as time went by, the private sector has recognized and did recognize that data could be used for better decisions, for understanding the marketplace, for really focusing on customers, optimizing their processes. And as more of the world became digitized, more data was being created, and that was again adding to the ability for private companies to be more data driven and responsive to their customer needs. Now, when I moved into the public sector in 2011, approximately, the first thing I quickly recognized was that cities also generate enormous volumes of data, enormous volumes, because it's just in the act of being a city, you create data. You're issuing permits and parking tickets and citations. You're people, you have to store birth certificates and death certificates and all sorts of records and forms, and let me just say a lot of data, both analog and digital, and increasingly digital. But then I also recognized, what are we doing with it? Are we, after we have the first use of it, are we good at analyzing that data to look for patterns and make better decisions? What signals are in the noise, if you like, around all this data? And then as I looked at different cities, including our own at the time, it was clear to me that cities didn't have necessarily the expertise. They didn't have the expertise to be really good at managing and governing that data that they had. Things are changing, though. We're changing, and so the question, getting back to the core of the question, how do cities derive value from data? Number one, I guess, is it holds a lot of answers. If you have data in volume and you can analyze it, excuse me, you can make better data informed decisions. And I mean, this is what government does, and this is what policymakers do. The elected officials, for the most part, they're making policy choices, and they need as much information to make those informed choices. That's number one, right? And so the cities that do that well make better choices. They have more visibility to the core of problems, what's going on. The second thing, and I'll only do three. The second one is it provides information for community. It provides visibility from the community to the machinations of the urban environment. That term you used earlier, that transparency, that again, we answer that question. For example, what is my government doing with my money? You should be able to see that. And in fact, in some communities, you can see close to real time how checks are being written, like where the checks are going. And a lot of smarter communities are enabling this. And people can see all sorts of information. For example, the quality of air, the quality of their water. People deserve to know that so they can make informed choices. And then the third one is data can enable co-creation between all sorts of stakeholders, right? Between the government, community members, private sector, academia. And, the question that often happens is, how can cities do all the things they have to do? And the answer is they can't. It is a daily exercise of prioritization. I found myself so much of the time simply making priority choices all the time because you simply can't do everything. Well, wow. if you partner, right, then you can do more things. You add additional capacity and intelligence. So a government that has an outreach and brings in the community, brings in NGOs and universities, can start to co-create, and that sort of glue, that connective tissue is data. And so what the private sector wants is data so they can build solutions and solve problems. And government can provide that and can provide the subject matter expertise. So it's a really big, exciting topic. It's one of the areas in the book that I go really deep into because I think it is one of the game-changing aspects of the future of our cities.
That's incredibly powerful. And hearing you articulate that, I think gives me, as a citizen of many cities around the world, an opportunity to really understand what's my role in providing that data too, just as much as there is the platform that the city managers and data scientists are taking that information and using it to kind of make better decisions. Where is it as a citizen that I play a role in, using that data, even if it were that there were kind of global portals of that information, that I could create businesses and products and services for my fellow citizens as well. So
yes.
Are there any examples? I know that you've mentioned a couple in the past, and I've got one here that I'll share with everybody too. I'll do that now. But things like sort of data portals or open data institutes, how can people get involved with them?
Yeah, this is one of the areas that allows people to have a relationship with their community. One of the starting points I would suggest is, now the great thing about UNIT and doing a thing like this is it's viewed by people all over the world, all over the planet. We're very privileged to have that this platform. And so what I would recommend is, no matter where you live, if you're watching us on video from India or Europe or the United States, is find out if your own city has a data portal, a place where all the city data is. We're calling it, you introduced the term, Tia, of open data in this conversation. And that really is the broader term for when governments do make the data sets that they hold freely available to anyone who wants it. And most government data is not regulated and actually is available for everybody. There's a small set that is regulated and protected by law, and it's different again in different countries. But the vast majority of it can be made available, and governments have been making a concerted effort to make that data available over the last 5 years or so. So I would say go to find out if your local city has an open data portal. You'll probably find it on your city's website. So find out if you don't know what your city. Yeah,
that's really, really good to know. And I think that we'll delve into a little bit more of how people can be sort of not only using that data for products and services, but how they can get involved as well. Just a quick one, actually. We're talking about sort of George Orwell's 1984. A lot of data going around. There's a lot of information about, where people are, how they're behaving. Of course, on the side there is the Apple COVID project. Everyone who has an Apple phone has had an update which allows for a service to track through Bluetooth where you are, where you've been, and the information that can then sort of really aid, at least in recommending and warning to other people who have been in your vicinity that you may have COVID if you've got it. So there is a lot of use of that centralized versus decentralized version of that data. I'm sort of curious. There could be some serious nightmare scenarios for smart cities, especially when that data is centralized and kept in one hub. All of a sudden, it's not just on my iPhone. So if my iPhone goes missing, no one's got access to it. That's the end of that. What are the nightmares?
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, you set that up so well. And it's funny that often, I'm an optimist. I think you're an optimist too. I always want to see the better side of things. I always want to see I look at how things can, new innovation, new technologies can improve the world. So that's my posture. I usually take an optimistic perspective. But I meet a lot of people, and I hear from a lot of people who their first entry point to this conversation is concern. And we have to listen to that. We have to absolutely listen to those concerns. People are afraid that smart cities equal surveillance cities. They're afraid that it's about losing privacy. It's about being monitored. And I'll get to in a moment the aspects of that, but that's not how I see it. And many cities aren't looking at smarter cities as a way to have more control. I know there's a lot of people who will disagree with me and will argue this. And let's have the argument. Let's have the debate, because that's an important one to have. In the course of rolling out these technologies, let's say sensors that are used for monitoring traffic, or even capturing the quality of air so that cities can respond and people can be informed. The information is collected, and sometimes it is of a private nature. And so the nightmare scenario is that the focus becomes about collecting more and more private data and not protecting that data and using it potentially in ways that we're not consented to. Using it without permission and what maybe people would perceive as nefarious, just not appropriate for cities, and through not by intention, some of that could happen by cities, and certainly there will be communities in the world that will use data in ways that we don't approve of, and certain cultures don't approve of. So the nightmare scenario is that we are simply just not managing this. That the ability to conduct robust surveillance and intrude on privacy gets out of hand and doesn't have the oversight and the regulation to protect all of us. And then the focus is all on sensors and analytics, and we lose it. We go off on a path that is so much more about that, and we forgot that the whole reason we started all this in the first place was to improve the quality of life for people. And quality of life might actually mean more privacy. It might, privacy often means the desire to be left alone. Just don't ask me or intrude on my world. So the action here is we got to be careful in each of the steps we take. When we deploy sensor networks in our cities, our Internet of Thing networks for all sorts of air
Big data.
quality, water quality, traffic counting, all the important things that cities have to do, that we don't govern it, that we don't have oversight, that we don't have regulation in place that is meaningful and helpful. So we're faced with that, particularly around data. If the question was more broad, and I think you did want it to be more broad too, is what's the nightmare scenario for smarter cities, is that we over focus on technology, is that it becomes too much about automation and digitalization and robotics, and we forget about the humanity. The image of the future might be the Jetsons, right? Rolling flying cars, and we have this futuristic life, when in reality the cities in the future might be very rustic kind of places with urban forests and large green spaces, and buildings that are covered in plants, and and water flowing, like little streams that run down the center of highways, or beside railways and light rail. So the nightmare is not Blade Runner. I mean, sorry, the future is not necessarily Blade Runner. That could be the nightmare. The future might more be a more gentler, healthier, cleaner environment. So let's be real careful as we make these important decisions going forward.
Thank you really for outlining the difference between surveillance and what is it that we're being surveilled over, and where is it that we also have a role in identifying our relationship with the future of a city that we're living in. And I think that many of my friends will want to ask questions to people who are running these cities, and recognizing and understanding the role of the leadership that goes into making these sorts of high level decisions, prioritizing certain things on our behalf. I mean, I'd love to know some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So we need. So who makes decisions? I mean, that's the key question. Who makes decisions? In a way, if you kind of look at the history of democracy, it was about identifying someone else to make decisions on your behalf, and that was necessary for a whole variety of reasons, including the person who was most informed, the inefficiency of everybody having a say. So it's served as reasonably well. Some will say our best democracies are sort of not the best decision-making process, but it's the best of what we have, right? It's the best of what we've been able to do so far. And so what digitalization enables us to do for the first time, and this is one of the characteristics of a fourth industrial revolution that we're heading into. If someone's playing, the bingo card now on Jonathan Reichental, they just got another one. Is that you've everything from mass production goes to mass customization. You've marketing goes from I'm going to have an ad in a newspaper that just I just spray out my marketing and hope that someone picks it up, to I'm going to send an ad to an individual or group of individuals who I know are interested in my product. Digitalization, in fact, is allowing us to be more granular, more engaged, more connected, of course. And so the question of decision making is one that's evolving in our communities. And so we now have a whole set of new tools for engaging a broader set of the community in everything from housing choices to questions of budgeting. So you have a phenomenon like participative budgeting, right, where the annual budgeting process brings in people to help make decisions. If we spend money on this thing, we won't have money for this thing. And historically that was done behind the scenes in a black box. People didn't have a lot of visibility to it, but now with digital tools and collaboration platforms, we can bring in a lot of people to participate in the decision making. if you are the leader, for smart city work, and maybe this is more of the core of your question, you need the success I've seen around the world in smart city projects are those when a broad amount of voices are included in the conversation. So definitely you want to lead, no question. We need leaders, but bring in voices and find the platforms and the digital platforms to enable that.
I feel like the sort of the voices that we're talking about are the voices of community. They're the people who live in the communities that are going to be affected by the decisions that you take. You're using, the kind of the broader sense, you're using our taxes to pay for the things that we're asking for globally and locally. And for those local communities, what kind of a role can they play in building smarter cities or creating these sorts of relationships between the leadership of cities to their needs, and understanding that there is a role that they can play, not just somebody has been employed, that somebody is doing some work somewhere in some black box. I don't know. Yeah, it must be happening somewhere.
Right. Well, that was my perspective too. If we were having this conversation 12 years ago, I would have said, I have no idea how to make change happen in my community. I have no idea how to have a voice. And people get frustrated by that. This is still a big area of frustration. There's various ways that we can make our, views known, and it includes everything from, the legal process right through to protests, being, screaming at the top of your voice, and, and doing all sorts of activities that get the attention of people. But there are now today, finally in the 21st century, more ways for more people to have a voice and to get involved in the community. And it's never been more important. I mean, that's, I think, at the heart again of this question. Smart cities is not about a small set of bureaucrats in City Hall designing the future. It has to be about a fully immersive, democratic process of bringing in as many people as possible from every age group and every segment of society. And right. And we don't do a great job of that so far. We can do better. And I keep reinforcing this point, but I want to be more specific about it. When I talk about digital platforms and engaging people, what I'm saying is, when city life happens on a Monday night or a Wednesday night, that's when the council meets, the elected officials get together and they bring in the public. A lot of people can't make that meeting. You know why? Because they're looking after kids and they're worrying about, getting up the next day and their mortgage. They're worried about day-to-day stuff. They don't have the ability to spend 4 or 5 hours necessarily in the
town hall.
The town hall meeting. So what digitalization enables is people to have a voice, from their smartphone, the ability to weigh in on decisions or to express a point of view. And
speeding up that process, which would otherwise be, a number of hours, which, as you mentioned, are probably quite difficult. I mean, I'm in Lichfield at the moment with my sister and her 2 kids, and there are moments where my brain's not working because I've got some toy in my ear and I'm trying to figure out what to do, and my brain is like, it feels as if it's been squashed on one side of the head where it's like it's not functioning right now. So I can only imagine that when it's quieter in the evening, maybe I'll just get on my phone, and if I am a parent or have other responsibilities, I mean, there are parents that have multiple jobs, so I can only imagine it's moments in between to make it extremely accessible, extremely easy to just be able to get involved. And I think that level of inclusivity it is paramount, I think, if we are to be designing cities for humanity rather than for technology's sake. So I think that kind of bridge between what is the community and where is the individual person's role in that community, because it's nice to be able to have a community. During the times of COVID, 50% of the work has been done from communities delivering things to vulnerable people, to checking in, making sure that support network is there. On a more personal level, what would you say is the sort of the role of a person as acting in that agent of change and shift within the actual city? So what can, if I really want to do something, how can I do it?
Yes. And that's the question so many people have for me. I think you too, when we do our keynote talks and we come off stage, people say, I'm inspired. Now what?
Yeah,
what did I
exactly.
do?
Like, ah, you got me really excited.
Yeah.
Now what? Who cares, right? Like, unless if we're going to do something about it.
Right. And one of the things I kind of share with folks, I think this is quite heartwarming, is I love that people want to be involved because they have the ability to have, to take action and make things better, and that's why I do the work. A lot of the work is coming to America has given me this great this good life, and I've really been honored and privileged to have it, and I've wanted to give back, and that's having the social drive to change your community is a positive one, and that's one of the incentives for many people. But I always say also there is an economic opportunity too. You can make money doing this. You can actually build a business, a good, sustainable, healthy business that can increase the quality of life for people too. So isn't that great? You kind of add, social impact with, economic benefits, both to the community and yourself and your colleagues. So actually doing something in your city is meaningful on a whole range of levels. It's not just voluntarism. Voluntarism is one important part, but you can actually do good work that makes a better community and build a business. And I've seen this over and over again. And one of the ways you do that, by the way, is by leveraging that open data that you and I spoke about earlier today. Is there's so much rich, incredible data, in those in City Hall or in the systems of City Hall, that if you can tap into it, which you should be able to, the unregulated, the sort of non-private stuff, and build a solution. I'll give you an example. Permitting is a difficult process for many people and organizations and cities, and it's one of the things that's core to a city functioning. You have to permit either certain types of stores to open, or you have to, if you're doing an upgrade in your kitchen, you got to get the electricity certified, and you got to get a permit for that. Permitting is a big part of every city, and so how can we make it better? There's some amazing new innovation happening in the permitting space today, and one of the reasons it's happening is because permit data is open data. There's nothing, for the most part, that is private about that. And because cities are making it available, these new solutions, like in Palo Alto, we had one solution at the time called Civic Insight. They took our permit data and, for example, made it available in a format that was much easier to understand. So I could, any community member could type in, what's happening on my street, and put their street name in, and it would list in plain English, or give photographs and other data about the construction that was happening on their street or at the neighbor's house. And so
translating that data into as many different languages as possible, as many different visuals as possible.
Right.
When I look at a stream of CSV sort of data, I think it's comma separated values, but it's just, this kind of like sheet of data.
Right.
I'm like, this doesn't say anything to me. But the moment that you start to, put it into Python script and plug it in, and then take that data and sort of visualize it in very different ways, in different languages, then all of a sudden it becomes accessible. It makes it super easy to try and understand where that data is being used, and what is the process through which that the system is being thought through. So it's almost as if during these COVID times, I really felt as if there is an opportunity to rethink all systems. It's as if we've been doing everything, the way that we thought was going to be really important up until now. And now, during this sort of cocoon or chrysalis period, we're in this sort of liminal identity, which means that these systems that we've operated within when it comes to cities has actually given us an opportunity right now to question, is this what we want? Is this how we want it? Is this the best way to do it? And I think having that sort of internet access across the globe, where we can see the emergency is across the world. Everybody has had this emergency, is experiencing this emergency, is thinking the same questions,
Right.
but the answers are different. So even when it comes to cities and the systems that we put into place, the questions are the same, the answers are different. So it's almost a really great opportunity to recognize in the times of emergency or resilience, when we are planning these cities of the future, smart cities or dumb cities that need to be smartened up, or citizens that need access to that information so they can have the intellectual power that they need to be able to plug in wherever they need to make those decisions. It feels as if this is the first time that we're asking many, many big questions about, is this even needed? Do we even need to have this level of technology when I can't walk down the street without having that 2-meter distance, with that sort of question of physical and social distancing, right? It's a physical distance, not necessarily a social distance. I've noticed people become even more socially interactive, even if it is on the digital platform. So these cities are sort of this coming together of thinking, of beliefs, of systems. And it's really an opportunity that we have today in identifying, what does smart mean for us? What's our role in creating an identity within that city infrastructure where we and what we do matters? And that sort of connection bridge point, I think, is basically where I'm going to leave it. Jonathan, it's been absolutely fantastic having this chat with you, delving deep into the book, Smart Cities for Dummies, because I think that the more we can sort of explore what cities mean to us, the more we can get involved with how they can become cities that are more appropriate to the future sort of needs that we and our children will have. So how can people get in contact with you? Of course, I've shared the link of the book. People can buy Smart Cities online. It has reached #1 status on Amazon, by the way. But this is a great opportunity for people to get in contact with you, have that conversation, check out some of the interviews that you've done on Drinking Wine and Talking Tech on your podcast, and sort of start a conversation, I think, with you. Any other thoughts or suggestions of or anything that I've missed out?
Thank you so much. No, the honor and the pleasure has been all mine, Tia. You've done an amazing job being the writer, producer, director, host of this incredible show today. People don't realize all the things you're doing behind the scenes there to make this live broadcast and this recorded video so polished. So well done.
Do you like it? It's so much
I loved
fun,
it. I've been enjoying
zoom into us.
Yeah, you've been doing amazing stuff. No, I think we've covered this topic quite nicely in the short time we've had together. It's a huge topic. I love it because, if you're interested in buildings, well, this is a buildings topic. If you're interested in architecture, in energy systems and the future of solar and tidal, if you're interested in the survival of the planet, cities really matter. So, I'm passionate about this, try to get as much as I could into the book. But of course, as you said, I'm totally available to chat about this and to expand on the topics. And you're an expert in this area too. And I'd encourage people to talk with you as well. And you're doing fabulous things around the whole sustainability movement and just having a nice, healthy, sustainable world for all of us. So thank you for the work you do too. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I just wanted to mention that there are some amazing suggestions that people have shared on the actual comments. So please do get involved, interact with other people. I know that Bruce Cahan has actually shared some of his own personal work on sort of, privacy and financing cities. And, it's been really a pleasure to see his own journey in Palo Alto, also at Stanford University. So, really sort of delve into what it is that you need, and if there's anything that we can help you with, or if there's a person that you'd like to have on the show, let me know. I'm going to share the Facebook link for Replenisher that you can follow, and it's a real opportunity to be able to delve deep with you. And Jonathan, I really hope that people will have the chance to learn more through your book, and also to sort of recognize, I think, one of the larger questions, which is, cities are for all, not just for for you and I. So on that note, thank you all very much for joining, and excited to, continue the show. See you soon. Bye.